The wind screamed across the jagged cliffs of planet Revar, carrying the sound of thunder and the cries of fear. The night sky was black, painted only by flashes of lightning. At the edge of the cliff stood a group of armored alien warriors. Their silver armor reflected the storm's light, and their faces were hidden behind masks. In their arms they held a small alien girl. She trembled, her eyes wide with terror. She was no ordinary child. She was Princess Lyra Solen, the only heir to the royal house of Revar. Her family ruled for centuries, keeping peace across the planet. But tonight, peace was gone. The royal palace had burned, the king and queen betrayed by their own guards. And now, the last of their bloodline was standing at the edge of death. One of the warriors shouted over the storm, "She carries the blood of the humans. Her mother mixed with their kind. She is a curse." The others raised their weapons, chanting the same word again and again. "Curse, curse, curse." Lyra shook her head, tears rolling down her dirty cheeks. "Please, I didn't do anything," she cried. Her small voice was lost in the thunder. An older alien, the commander, stepped forward. His armor was red, his eyes cruel. "You are the symbol of shame, child. The royal blood mixed with human weakness. We cannot allow your kind to live," he gave the order. Two soldiers grabbed Lyra's arms. She kicked and screamed, but she was too small. Her feet slipped against the wet rock. The storm roared louder, as if the planet itself was weeping. "Please," she begged again, looking up at them with glowing silver eyes. "My father said kindness is strength. Don't do this." But there was no mercy in their hearts. The commander raised his hand. "Let the storm take her." With a final scream, they pushed her off the cliff. Her body fell into the dark fog below. The wind swallowed her cry, and then there was silence. The soldiers watched for a moment, then turned away. They believed the cursed bloodline was gone forever. The war was over, they thought. But far below, beyond their sight, the little girl did not die. Lyra hit a thick branch on the way down, breaking her fall before crashing into a pool of muddy water. Her tiny body lay still for a moment, surrounded by glowing alien plants that pulsed softly like beating hearts. The rain poured down on her, washing away the blood and tears. Somehow she opened her eyes. She gasped, coughing water. Her small hands grabbed at the wet soil. She was alive, weak, hurt, and lost, but alive. Above her, lightning flashed again, revealing the shape of the massive cliff she had fallen from. She could see the dark clouds swirling like monsters. She wanted to call out for her parents, but no sound came. Her voice was gone, drowned in the storm. A strange blue light flickered nearby. Half buried in the mud was a round object, broken and glowing faintly. It was her royal pendant, gifted by her father, the king. Inside it was a small beacon used only by humans. It blinked weakly, sending one final signal into the sky before fading away. That signal would travel across the stars, bouncing through satellites and forgotten stations, until it reached a distant human research outpost, one that no one had used in years. A red light blinked on the console, unnoticed by anyone. Then silence returned once more. Lyra crawled under the roots of a giant tree to escape the rain. She curled into a ball, clutching her broken pendant to her chest. Her body shivered, but her heart refused to stop. She remembered her father's words again. "Kindness is strength. Never forget who you are," the little alien girl whispered through her tears. "I'll live, Papa, I promise." And so she did. 15 years passed. The cliff where she fell became a forbidden place. The locals said ghosts lived there. Hunters who went near the valley never returned. Strange lights glowed in the fog at night, and machines deep underground whispered in forgotten tongues. No one dared to go there, except one man. On a quiet morning, a human ship broke through the clouds. The pilot's name was Ethan Cole, a retired explorer who had once mapped the far corners of the galaxy. He had come to Ryvar for peace, to study the ruins and forget his own painful past. But as he scanned the mountains, his screen flickered. A signal appeared, ancient, weak, but still alive. It was the same beacon that had once belonged to a lost royal child. Ethan frowned. "That's impossible," he muttered. "This code is 15 years old." He didn't know it yet, but that tiny flicker of light was about to change everything. Somewhere below those cliffs, the alien girl who should have died was still waiting. Waiting for someone to keep her promise alive. Waiting for the human who would finally find her. 15 years had passed since that stormy night. The story of the fallen princess had turned into a ghost tale. something parents whispered to scare their children into behaving. The valley where she had vanished was now called the Hollow of the Lost. No one went there. Not even the bravest soldiers dared, but high above the same cliffs a small silver ship cut through the clouds. Inside sat Ethan Cole, a human explorer with a quiet face and eyes that had seen too much. He had once been a star pilot, a hero in wars that no longer mattered. Now he wanted silence, not glory. Ryvar, with its endless jungles and forgotten ruins, gave him that peace. His ship hummed softly as he flew low over the forests. The scanner flashed strange readings, ancient metal buried deep underground, old power signatures, and something else. Something faint and rhythmic. Ethan leaned closer to the console. "Come on, what are you?" he murmured. The signal was weak but steady, pulsing like a heartbeat. He adjusted the scanner range and the numbers made his heart skip. The transmission code was human. Old, ancient, but human. That can't be right, he said to himself. There's no human base here for hundreds of miles. He tapped the console again and a series of coordinates appeared. The source came from deep inside the Hollow of the Lost. He frowned. Locals had warned him about that place. They said machines whispered in the fog. They said anyone who entered never returned. Ethan didn't believe in curses, but he did believe in mysteries. He landed his ship near the valley's edge, stepping out into the cold wind. The ground was damp, covered in blue moss that glowed softly under his boots. The air smelled of metal and rain. He could hear the sound of distant waterfalls echoing from below. He adjusted his oxygen mask and began to climb down the rocky slope. His scanner blinked again, showing the same signal pattern. It wasn't random. It was repeating, almost like a distress call. "Whoever you are," he muttered. "You've been calling for a long time." Hours passed as Ethan descended deeper into the valley. The fog thickened until he could barely see a few feet ahead. Strange vines hung from the cliffs, moving as if alive. Once he thought he saw something watching him. Two faint silver eyes shining in the mist, but when he turned there was nothing. He finally reached the bottom, where the ground was wet and soft. Alien plants glowed all around him, filling the air with a dim, ghostly light. He followed the signal until he came to an ancient stone wall covered in carvings. The symbols were old, royal, markings from the long-lost house of Solon. Ethan brushed the moss aside. "Royal seal," he whispered. "How did this end up here?" He didn't know it yet, but he was standing in front of what had once been the royal escape tunnels, the last refuge of a dying dynasty. The scanner beeped again, louder now. The signal was coming from somewhere inside the ruins. He pulled out a small light and stepped through a cracked stone doorway. The air inside was cold, filled with dust and silence. His light beam caught on shattered furniture, rusted metal, and claw marks across the walls. Someone or something had been here. Recently. Suddenly the scanner went wild. The signal spiked, then vanished. No, come back," Ethan said, hitting the device. But it stayed blank. He sighed and switched on his helmet light. That's when he noticed footprints. Small ones, light but fresh. He followed them slowly, his pulse quickening. The prints led deeper into the tunnels toward an opening that glowed faintly blue. He crouched, hiding behind a column, and peeked through. There was a small cave ahead, glowing with strange light. Water dripped from the ceiling, and at the center stood a tall figure wrapped in old cloth and fur. The figure moved like someone who had learned to survive the wild. Long hair, silver eyes, and scars that told stories of pain and time. Ethan froze. "Impossible," he whispered. He had seen that symbol before, the faint royal mark tattooed on her arm. It matched the carvings outside. Could she be the one? The lost princess of Ryvar? No, that was just a legend. The girl had died years ago, hadn't she? Before he could think, his boot brushed against a loose stone. It rolled across the ground with a sharp clack. The figure's head snapped up. Two silver eyes glowed through the shadows. Then, without hesitation, she raised a spear and hurled it. It missed his face by an inch, striking the wall behind him. Ethan ducked and lifted his hands. "Wait, I'm not your enemy," he shouted, but the figure didn't believe him. She stepped into the light, her face fierce and tired, her voice sharp as a blade. "No one comes here," she said in a low growl. "Not unless they want to die." Ethan stared at her, speechless. After 15 years, the lost princess who had been thrown from the cliff was alive, standing before him, and she thought he was an enemy. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The sound of dripping water echoed in the cave like falling time. Ethan stood with his hands raised, breathing slowly, while the young alien woman before him watched every move with sharp silver eyes. Her spear gleamed faintly in the dim light. She was no longer the fragile child who had fallen from a cliff 15 years ago. Her face carried scars, thin but deep like quiet stories carved by pain. Her long, dark hair was tied with pieces of vine, and her skin had the pale glow of someone who lived under shadow too long. "Who are you?" she demanded in a rough, tired voice. Ethan kept his tone calm. "My name's Ethan Cole. I'm a human explorer. I followed a signal here." Her eyes narrowed. "Human," she said bitterly, as if the word itself was poison. "You people left us to die." Ethan didn't answer at first. He could hear the anger behind her words and the grief that hid beneath it. He slowly lowered his pack and said, "Maybe, but I didn't come to hurt you." She tilted her head, uncertain. Her spear didn't lower, but her breathing softened. For the first time, Ethan saw something flicker behind those silver eyes. Fear, not of him, but of being found again. "Please," he said gently. "Tell me your name." She hesitated. Then she spoke quietly. "Lyra." Ethan froze. The name struck him like lightning. He had read it once in a long-forgotten data file. Princess Lyra Solen of Ryvar, the child who vanished the night the royal palace burned. He looked at her closely now. The royal markings on her arm, the strange pendant around her neck, the fragments of golden thread woven into her old cloak. Everything matched. "My God," he whispered. "You're real." Lyra frowned. "You talk like I'm a story." Ethan smiled sadly. "That's what everyone thought you were." She turned away, walking deeper into the cave. He followed carefully, keeping a few steps behind. The walls glowed faintly blue, covered in moss that pulsed like tiny hearts. In the center of the cavern was a small pool of water, still and clear as glass. Around it lay old metal pieces, parts of broken machines, rusted weapons, and bones long turned to dust. "This is where I fell," she said quietly. "I should have died." Ethan listened. He could tell she wasn't just talking to him, she was speaking to the ghosts of her past. "The first days were pain," she continued. "I couldn't walk. My bones were broken. I screamed until my throat was gone. The beast came at night. I hid in the roots. I ate whatever glowed. And then," she touched the pendant. "This light kept me alive. It reminded me of my father. He told me that kindness is strength." Her voice cracked slightly. Ethan could almost picture her as a little girl, crying in the rain, holding that broken pendant and whispering into the darkness. She looked up again, her eyes hard now. "When I got strong, I climbed the cliffs to go back. But the city was gone, burned. My people had new rulers. They said the royal blood was cursed because my mother was human. They called me a half-blood, a mistake." Ethan clenched his fists. "You didn't deserve that." "No one cared what I deserved," she replied coldly. "I learned to hide, to fight to survive. And now the valley is mine. The ghosts protect me. You should leave while you still can." But Ethan didn't move. He looked around at her cave, the scattered relics of her lonely kingdom. "You've been alone all this time," he said softly. "You don't have to be anymore." Lyra's grip on her spear tightened. "You don't understand. If the council knows I'm alive, they'll send hunters. They'll finish what they started." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then let them come. I've faced worse." Her eyes met his again, uncertain. For the first time, she saw something strange in this human. No fear, no pity, just quiet courage. Outside, thunder rumbled through the valley. The air trembled as if the planet itself was listening. Lyra looked toward the entrance, her expression darkening. "They already know," she whispered. Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" She turned sharply. "That signal you followed, it wasn't just a beacon. It was a royal code. When you activated it, they traced it." Ethan's stomach dropped. "Then they're coming here?" Lyra nodded. "Yes, and they won't stop until I'm dead." For a moment, silence filled the cave. The sound of the storm outside grew louder, closer. Then Ethan straightened and said, "Then we prepare together." Lyra stared at him, caught between disbelief and something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. "You'd risk your life for me?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Someone once told me kindness is strength." Her eyes widened. For the first time in 15 years, she felt warmth in her chest. The same words her father had spoken, the same promise that had kept her alive. Outside, the fog began to stir. The hunters were coming. But this time, Lyra was not alone. This time, she had a human by her side. The storm outside howled like a beast awakened from sleep. Wind roared through the valley, carrying faint mechanical sounds, the hum of ships approaching through the clouds. Inside the cave, the light of Lyra's glowing moss flickered on stone walls as she and Ethan prepared in silence. She moved quickly, gathering old weapons and small crystal cores that pulsed with energy. Ethan followed her every motion, studying her skill. She moved like someone who had survived too many nights alone, swift, sharp, and untrusting. Ethan crouched near his gear, checking the charge on his pulse rifle. "How many will come?" he asked. Lyra didn't look at him. "A full hunting squad. Maybe more. Armed?" She gave him a dry laugh. "Always. My people never travel without blades," Ethan nodded. He had seen war before. On Mars, on Titan, in the deep rings of Orion, but this felt different. This wasn't about territory. It was personal. "Why now?" he asked. "Why hunt you after all these years?" Lyra stopped for a moment, her eyes dark. "Because I'm proof they were wrong. The council told everyone the royal line was gone. If I live, their rule falls apart." Ethan's heart tightened. He understood. Power feared truth more than war. The ground trembled slightly. A low humming grew louder, like thunder with a heartbeat. Lyra turned toward the cave mouth. "They're here." Ethan picked up his rifle and followed her outside. The valley stretched wide, filled with mist that glowed faintly under the storm's electric light. In the distance, 3 black ships hovered above the ground, their searchlights cutting through the fog. Soldiers in dark armor dropped from ropes, weapons glowing red. Lyra gripped her spear, her silver eyes burning. "Stay behind me," Ethan smirked. "I wasn't built for hiding." She shot him a quick glare, but before she could reply, the first blaster bolt hit the rock beside them, exploding in a shower of sparks. They dove for cover. The air filled with noise, screams, fire, and the hum of alien energy weapons. Ethan rolled behind a boulder, returning fire with clean precision. Each shot hit with deadly accuracy, dropping 2 soldiers before they reached the cave. Lyra moved like lightning. She leaped from one rock to another, spinning her spear, deflecting shots and striking with deadly force. When one soldier tried to grab her, she twisted his arm, pulled his own blade, and struck him down with a single blow. Ethan watched for a moment, stunned. "Remind me never to fight you," he muttered. "Then keep up." "Human," she called back, her voice fierce. They fought side by side, their movements strange but perfectly balanced, his rifle covering long range, her spear striking close. Every minute, more soldiers poured in from the fog, and every minute they pushed them back. Then a deep mechanical roar echoed through the valley. From one of the ships, a massive armored warrior stepped out. His armor shimmered black with gold marks, the sign of the royal assassins. Lyra froze. Her grip tightened on the spear. "That's Commander Vorak," she whispered. "He's the one who threw me off the cliff." Ethan's eyes hardened. "Then let's return the favor." The commander laughed, his voice like metal scraping stone. "So the half-blood lives, and now hides behind a human? Pathetic." He raised his weapon, a giant energy staff that glowed with crackling red light, and swung it at them. The ground split where it struck, sending Ethan and Lyra tumbling aside. Rocks crashed down from above. Ethan grabbed her hand, pulling her behind a stone wall. "Any bright ideas?" he shouted. Lyra's face was calm but fierce. "Only one." She ran toward the commander before Ethan could stop her. The two clashed, sparks flying as her spear met his staff. Each strike echoed across the valley like thunder. The commander was stronger, but Lyra was faster. Her movements were wild yet graceful, every step filled with 15 years of rage and survival. But she was tiring. He struck her hard, sending her rolling into the mud. He raised his staff to finish her. Then a blue pulse bolt hit his armor, burning through his shoulder. Ethan stood at the edge of the cliff, rifle smoking. "You forgot about me." The commander roared in anger, turning toward him. That gave Lyra the opening she needed. She leapt up, spinning her spear through the rain, and struck him square in the chest. His armor cracked. A burst of energy exploded, knocking him back toward the cliff's edge. He reached out, grabbing her wrist, pulling her with him. For a moment, both balanced on the edge of death. Then Ethan dove forward, grabbing Lyra's other hand. The commander slipped, falling into the same abyss he had once thrown her into. The storm swallowed his scream. Ethan pulled Lyra back to solid ground. They collapsed beside each other, gasping for air. The rain fell softly now, washing the blood and mud from their faces. For a long time they said nothing. Then Lyra looked at him, her voice quiet. You saved me. Ethan smiled faintly. Looks like we're even now. She stared at him, trying to understand him. Why would a human risk his life for me? He looked out at the storm, his tone gentle. Because you've been alone long enough. The wind carried their silence as the rain faded. For the first time in 15 years, Lyra didn't feel like a ghost in her own world. She wasn't alone anymore. The storm had passed, leaving behind the scent of wet soil and smoke. The valley was quiet again, except for the soft hum of alien insects waking under the pale dawn. Ethan sat near the remains of a small fire, cleaning the scorch marks from his rifle. Beside him, Lyra watched the sky lighten with shades of violet and gold. Her silver eyes looked softer now, almost calm, but something heavy still lingered in them. Ethan broke the silence. You said that man, the one we fought, was the commander who threw you off the cliff. Lyra nodded slowly. Vorak, he was my father's general. Swore loyalty to our house, but when the council turned against us, he led the attack. Ethan frowned. Why? What could make him betray his own queen? Lyra's gaze drifted toward the cliffs. Because of me. Ethan looked at her, puzzled. You? She took a slow breath, as if preparing to reopen a wound that had never healed. My mother wasn't like the others of our kind. She was human, or half-human, from one of the early peace colonies. My father met her when humans came to Revar to build the alliance. Her voice softened. They said it was love at first sight. But the council hated her. They said humans were weak, that mixing bloodlines would destroy our purity. My father didn't care. He married her anyway, and I was born. She paused, staring at the pendant that hung around her neck, a cracked silver disc faintly glowing with light. When I was born, my mother died. The council called me cursed, said I was a sign that the gods had turned away from us. They told my father to abandon me, but he didn't. Ethan listened quietly. The fire crackled between them, the light dancing on her tired face. Lyra continued. He raised me in secret for years. Only his most loyal guards knew. But rumors grew. People said I carried human sickness in my veins, that I could infect our kind. And when my father refused to execute me, the council turned against him. They told the soldiers to purify the bloodline. That's when they came for us. She looked down at her hands, trembling slightly. They killed him that night. My father, he fought to protect me. He shouted my name as they dragged me away, and then they threw me into the storm. For a moment, her voice broke completely. The air seemed to freeze around them. Ethan's jaw tightened. He could almost see it now. The palace in flames, the frightened girl ripped from her father's arms, the betrayal that started it all. You survived, he said softly. Yes, she whispered. But surviving isn't living. Ethan looked at her pendant again. That's human tech, right? She nodded. My mother left it for me. She said it holds my lineage. Proof of what I am. Ethan reached into his pack and pulled out his scanner. Mind if I take a look? Lyra hesitated, then nodded. He held the pendant under the scanner light. The device flickered, reading the faint energy signature. Then the screen lit up with human characters, old Earth code mixed with alien glyphs. Ethan's eyes widened. This isn't just a keepsake, he said. It's a genetic key. It contains your DNA pattern and both halves of it. Human and Ryvaran, fully integrated. You're not cursed, Lyra. You're proof that humans and your kind can coexist. Lyra blinked. What are you saying? Ethan turned the screen toward her. Your blood isn't impure, it's evolution. You're the bridge between our species. You were supposed to be the beginning of peace, not the end of it. She stared at the screen, her lips parting in shock. Then everything they told me was a lie, Ethan finished. They feared what you represent. Unity. They built their power on hate. If the truth about you ever came out, the council would crumble. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the soft crackling of the fire. Lyra's eyes shimmered with a mix of pain and wonder. I always thought my mother's blood made me weak, she said. But you're telling me it made me stronger? Ethan smiled faintly. Maybe strength was never about blood. Maybe it's about the courage to keep going when the world wants you gone. A small smile touched her lips. You sound like my father. Then he was a wise man, but the moment of peace didn't last. Ethan's scanner beeped suddenly. He looked down and his face hardened. We've got movement, more ships incoming. They must have traced the signal again. Lyra rose to her feet, eyes burning. Then it's time they hear the truth. Ethan stood beside her. You mean to fight them? No, she said quietly, her voice strong now. I mean to face them. For 15 years I've been running from what I am. But if I'm the bridge between two worlds, then I can't hide anymore. She looked up at the sky where dark dots were already forming, more council ships breaking through the clouds. If they want the royal blood, she said, gripping her spear, they'll see what royal blood truly means. Ethan loaded his weapon and smiled. Then let's make history. As the valley began to tremble again, the two stood side by side, human and alien outcasts and symbols of hope. Lightning flashed above them, and for a moment, it looked as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The final war for truth had begun. The valley trembled as thunder rolled once more across the alien sky. The clouds above Ryvar had turned blood red, reflecting the glow of descending warships. Engines howled like demons breaking through the heavens. Ethan and Lyra stood at the edge of the cliff, their silhouettes lit by the burning light of approaching destruction. Ethan adjusted his weapon, his voice steady. They're coming in fast. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they hit ground. Lyra's eyes glowed silver beneath the storm. She held her spear close to her chest. Then we make every minute count. They moved quickly. Ethan dragged out crates from his ship's cargo hold, old defense drones, portable turrets, and shield emitters. These are outdated, he said, panting, but they'll buy us time. Lyra nodded and began placing crystal orbs in the ground around the cliffs. These stones are from my people, she said. When charged with energy, they create a barrier field. It was one of the last royal technologies my father made. Ethan looked at her with quiet admiration. Then your father was a genius, she smiled faintly. He believed in peace. That's why they feared him. The first dropships landed beyond the fog. The hiss of hydraulic doors echoed like metal serpents. Dozens of armored soldiers emerged, their weapons humming with red plasma. Above them, banners of the council flapped violently in the wind, black, gold, and cruel. From the front stepped Admiral Kale, a tall alien with piercing violet eyes and armor engraved with symbols of conquest. Find the half-blood and the human, he ordered coldly. No survivors. Ethan crouched behind a ridge, whispering, they really don't waste time with negotiations. Lyra's voice was calm but fierce. They never did. The soldiers advanced, spreading through the valley like a dark tide. The hum of drones and the shimmer of Lyra's crystals filled the air. The barrier field rose around them, glowing blue as the first plasma bolts hit it and scattered harmlessly. Ethan fired from behind cover, precise and fast. Each shot hit true, sending sparks and screams echoing through the mist. Lyra leaped into battle beside him, her spear flashing silver through the smoke. She moved with grace and fury, every strike a memory of 15 years of pain unleashed. Stay close, Ethan shouted. I can handle them, she replied, twisting her spear and disarming a soldier before striking another with a burst of energy that lit the fog like lightning. Then, a deep rumble shook the ground. Ethan looked up and froze. One of the warships had turned its cannons downward, aiming directly at them. They're going to blast the valley, he yelled. Lyra's eyes widened. If they fire, the whole mountain will collapse. Ethan hit his wrist pad, activating his last drone. Then we stop them before they do. The drone launched upward, releasing flares and countermeasures, but it wasn't enough. The ship's cannon charged with a high-pitched whine. Lyra dropped to her knees beside one of her crystals. Cover me! What are you doing? Ethan shouted, firing wildly. Something I've never tried before, she said, closing her eyes. The crystals began to hum. Their light grew brighter, pulsing with every heartbeat. The markings on Lyra's skin, those faint silver veins that had once made others call her cursed, began to glow fiercely. The air around her shimmered, bending light itself. Lyra, Ethan called, shielding his eyes. What's happening? Her voice was soft but powerful. The blood of the royals. It carries a bond with the planet. My father told me once, it's not magic. It's life itself. She pressed her palm to the ground and the earth answered. A blinding surge of energy erupted from the crystals, shooting up into the storm. The clouds parted in a brilliant explosion of blue light. The incoming cannon fire met the energy wave and vanished, scattering harmlessly across the sky. The soldiers staggered, blinded. The warship above cracked under the pressure, its engines failing. It fell into the distant cliffs with a fiery crash that shook the valley for miles. Ethan turned to her, eyes wide. You just took down a ship. Lyra's breathing was heavy, her hands trembling. It wasn't me, she whispered. It was the planet. I just reminded it that I'm still its daughter. Before Ethan could reply, Admiral Kale's voice boomed from the comms of the soldiers. Enough games. End them. Dozens of blasters aimed at once. Ethan dove beside Lyra, covering her with his shield as the valley lit with plasma fire. Sparks rained around them, the barrier weakening. He could feel his arm burning from the heat. Ethan, Lyra shouted.
You'll die.
He gritted his teeth. Not before they do. She reached for him, grabbing his arm, and suddenly the crystals pulsed again. The barrier expanded outward, knocking every soldier off their feet. The explosion of light was like a sunrise tearing through the storm. When the silence returned, the soldiers were gone. Some fled, others unconscious. The ships retreated, engines screaming into the clouds. Ethan fell to his knees, gasping. His armor was scorched, his arm bleeding. Lyra knelt beside him, her hand glowing faintly as she pressed it over his wound. You're hurt, he smiled weakly. You should see the other guys. Lyra laughed softly, a sound she hadn't made in years. You humans never stop joking, even at the edge of death. Helps with the pain, he muttered. They sat there together in the quiet, the storm clearing above them. The first light of dawn broke through the clouds, bathing the valley in soft gold. Lyra looked at the sunrise, her eyes filled with something new. Not fear, not anger, but hope. They'll be back, she said. Ethan nodded. Then we'll be ready. She turned to him, her silver eyes glimmering. You've already given me more than I ever hoped for. He smiled faintly. You haven't seen anything yet. The wind whispered through the valley, carrying away the smoke and blood. For the first time in 15 years, the royal blood of Ryvar had risen, not as a curse but as a promise. The years that followed the Battle of the Valley became legend. What began as a desperate fight for survival turned into the first spark of peace between two worlds. The story spread from one planet to another, a human and an alien princess who defied hate and rewrote destiny. 15 years later, the world of Ryvar looked nothing like the one that had once cast its own queen's daughter from a cliff. The skies were clear again, filled with silver airships carrying traders and diplomats. The forests once haunted by soldiers were now home to glowing cities, where humans and Ryvarans lived side by side. At the heart of it all stood the Hall of Unity, a shining tower built upon the ruins of the old royal palace. Its walls glowed faintly with blue veins of energy, the same light that had once flowed through Lyra's royal crystals. Inside, the great hall buzzed with quiet anticipation. Rows of alien nobles stood beside human ambassadors, their once suspicious eyes softened by years of cooperation. On the dais, beneath a grand silver banner marked with both human and Ryvaran symbols, stood Queen Lyra Solin, tall, graceful, and radiant. Her silver eyes reflected the soft golden light of dawn that streamed through the skylight above, but behind her regal calm, her heart was restless. Today was not just another anniversary of peace. It was also the day she would finally fulfill a promise. Lyra turned as an aide approached, an elderly human with kind eyes and a steady voice. Your Majesty, the guests are ready, she nodded. And the memorial? It's prepared, my queen. Her expression softened. Thank you, General Rowan. She walked through the hall, her long royal cloak flowing behind her. As she passed, humans and aliens alike bowed in silent respect. But Lyra hardly noticed. Her mind was far away, back to that valley, that storm, that man, Ethan Cole. The human who had stood beside her when no one else would. The one who had fought until the end. She had never forgotten him. When the council had fallen, Ethan was gravely wounded. He lived long enough to see her take the throne, but not long enough to see the world they dreamed of come true. His last words to her were simple. Don't build a throne, build a bridge. And she had done just that. Now, 15 years later, she was about to keep her final promise. Lyra stepped out onto the balcony. Below, thousands of citizens filled the great square, waving banners of blue and gold. The air shimmered with light from drones broadcasting the ceremony across the galaxy. Her voice echoed through the grand plaza, calm but powerful. 15 years ago, this world was broken. Fear ruled our hearts. We were told that difference was weakness, that compassion was a disease. But one man, a human, showed us that kindness is strength. The crowd grew silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. Lyra continued, her voice trembling slightly. When I was a child, I was thrown from a cliff because of what I was. Half human, half Revaran. They called me cursed, but today I stand before you not as a curse, but as proof that two worlds can become one. Applause thundered through the city, echoing across the sky. She raised her hand, and a holographic image appeared beside her, Ethan Cole, standing in his explorer's uniform, smiling that quiet, tired smile. This is the man who saved me when the galaxy turned away. He saw not a monster, but a person, and for that I owe him everything. Tears glimmered in her eyes, but she didn't hide them. Today we honor his memory not with warships or weapons, but with something greater. She turned toward the massive archway behind her, newly built, engraved with symbols from both species. From this day forth, this city shall bear his name, Cole's Haven, the first home of humans and Rivarans alike. The crowd erupted in cheers. Children waved glowing lights in the air, and elders bowed their heads in reverence. Across the galaxies, people watched and wept. For the first time in generations, unity didn't feel like a dream. As the noise faded, Lyra looked up at the sky, where two moons shone side by side. "You kept your word, Ethan," she whispered softly, "and I kept mine." Then, from the edge of the square, a small boy ran up, a human child with bright eyes and silver threads in his hair. "Mother," he called, holding something in his hands. Lyra turned, her smile warm. "What is it, little one?" He opened his palm. Inside lay a small cracked pendant, the same one she had carried since the night she fell. It still glowed faintly blue. "I found it near the old valley," the boy said proudly. "Does it still work?" Lyra's eyes softened as she knelt and placed her hand over his. "It already did," she whispered. "It brought me to where I was meant to be." The crowd began to sing the anthem of the new kingdom, a soft, slow melody that echoed through every heart. Humans and Rivarans raised their voices together, their tones blending perfectly, neither overpowering the other. As the sun dipped low, the city lights glowed like stars. Queen Lyra stood tall on the balcony, the pendant shining faintly against her chest. The world she once feared had become her kingdom, and her father's words whispered once more through her mind. Kindness is strength. And now, through her and through him, that truth had finally changed the galaxy forever.